Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. As oil prices fall amid signs of U.S.-Iran negotiations, President Trump announces a new deal with India. This, as the president says he's talking to the highest people in Cuba, hopefully about a deal. A $12 billion rare earth stockpile. The Trump administration makes the historic move to reduce U.S. reliance on China. House lawmakers are returning to Capitol Hill, aiming to end a partial government shutdown that started over the weekend. Democrats rejected fast-tracking the funding bills, slowing the process until at least Tuesday. Violent crime falls in Washington, D.C. The nation's capital saw just 2 murders last month, compared with 9 in January. President Trump is warning UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer about the dangers of doing business with China. We speak to an analyst about this. Pennsylvania's most famous groundhog reveals his prediction. The annual tradition goes back to more than a century.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Oil prices today are easing as President Trump says he believes Iran is negotiating seriously with the U.S. That's as the president announces a new trade deal with India. He says India's agreed to stop buying oil from Russia and to buy more from the U.S. and maybe Venezuela. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the North Lawn of the White House. Mari, good afternoon.
Don, good afternoon. That's right, President Trump today providing a readout of that call between India's Prime Minister Modi and himself, saying that they spoke about many things in that conversation, including trade and ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. President Trump, in his readout, touts their friendship and announces that the U.S. will reduce their tariffs on India from 25% to 18%. That's as India then reduces their tariffs on the U.S. to 0. President Trump also says that in that conversation, Modi committed to, quote, buying more American, in addition to over $500 billion of investments in the U.S.'s agriculture, coal, and technology. Meanwhile, President Trump also says that the U.S. may make a deal with Cuba, that the U.S. is currently talking to, quote, Cuba's highest people. Take a look.
Well, Cuba's a failing nation. It has been for a long time, but now it doesn't have Venezuela to prop it up. So we're talking to the people from Cuba, the highest people in Cuba. We'll see what happens. I want the people that came here that were horribly treated by Cuba to be taken care of, to be able to go back and do what they have to do. They have their family there. They haven't been able to see them in years, many, many years. So I think we're going to make a deal with Cuba. It's in bad shape. Cuba's in bad shape. Cuba has a humanitarian problem.
This comes just a few days after President Trump signed an executive order declaring a national emergency over Cuba and threatening tariffs on any nation that is providing oil to the communist regime there. And in the order, he blasts the regime for harboring adversaries, persecuting dissidents, spreading communist ideology throughout the Western Hemisphere, and for threatening the U.S.'s national security. The order says that Cuba aligns itself with, quote, numerous hostile countries, transnational terrorist groups, and malign actors adverse to the United States, naming China, Russia, Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah. And meanwhile, Axios is now reporting that U.S.-Iran nuclear talks are planned for this Friday amid a U.S. military buildup in the region. President Trump repeatedly has urged Iran to make a nuclear deal. Take a look.
So we figure out where your thinking is right now with Iran as you are making a final decision on what you want to do.
I mean, I certainly can't tell you that, but we do have very big, powerful ships heading in that direction. I can't tell you, but I hope they negotiate something that's acceptable.
Now, much closer to home, President Trump's announcing approximately two-year closure of the Trump Kennedy Center, subject to the board approval there for renovations. The president says that after a one-year review and consulting with many different experts, that the building needs to be temporarily closed for a, quote, complete rebuilding to, in his words, render it the best performing arts facility in the world. And if approved by the board, that closure would happen on the 250th anniversary of America's 250th birthday, that is July 4th. for 2026. And this announcement is coming just a few days after the premiere of the First Lady's documentary entitled Melania at the Trump Kennedy Center last Thursday. The documentary exceeded expectations, earning $7 million during opening weekend. That's the highest opening of a non-music documentary in over a decade. Don, back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. 2 more people have been arrested after a group stormed into a church in Minnesota during a Sunday service last month. The Justice Department is promising prosecution. Attorney General Pam Bondi made the announcement today, saying, "If you riot in a place of worship, we will find you." It's unclear which charges the 2 protesters face, but the DOJ said previously they are investigating federal civil rights violations over the church service disruption. A group of anti-ICE protesters stormed into City's church in St. Paul last month, shouting "ICE out" and interrupting the service. President Trump has called for jail time for the protesters and urged a broader investigation. Former CNN host Don Lemon was also arrested and charged with federal civil rights crimes for live streaming the protest inside the church. A showdown over ICE in Oregon. Portland's mayor recently said federal officials should depart the city after immigration agents launched tear gas at protesters. Portland Mayor Keith Wilson said the incident impacted what he called a peaceful daytime protest. Wilson called on those who continue to work for ICE to resign. He vowed that Portland will stand up for, quote, our immigrant neighbors. The mayor also praised protesters in what he called the face of federal overreach. The Portland police say officers monitored protesters near the ICE building on Saturday after a large crowd gathered in the area. ICE has not yet responded to an Epoch Times request for comment. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem is looking to dispel what she calls the media's lies about the work her department is doing. Speaking to Fox News yesterday, Noem said that the DHS has been finding children who had been trafficked and is reuniting them with their families. She also addressed allegations that immigration agents have been given quotas for deportations after the highly publicized case of one 5-year-old from Minneapolis was taken into ICE custody.
Is there a quota that you're getting from the White House that you have to meet, or are you just addressing crime and criminals as you see as they come to your awareness?
No, Rachel, there's no quotas. And let me be clear, these families always get the opportunity to stay together. This child has been with his father, which was the father's choice. We offered them the opportunity to go home, to send them back to their home country if they would like to. The father chose to stay, and therefore we're following the legal process. You've heard about all these children that we found and returned. We actually have countries that are asking for their children back.
She accused the media of lying about the work DHS does to bring dangerous criminals to justice. She added that the Trump administration is giving illegal immigrants the opportunity to self-deport and offering them a $2,600 reward for doing so. A partial government shutdown that kicked in over the weekend is now expected to last until at least Tuesday. Republicans aim to fast-track a vote, but Democrats want a full debate. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
The U.S. House back in session this week, lawmakers immediately facing the task of reopening the government after a partial weekend shutdown. Senators approved a last-minute deal to fund most of the government. They temporarily extended DHS funding to give more time for lawmakers to negotiate changes to ICE policy.
Our intention is by Tuesday, all agencies of the federal government, except for that one, and then we'll have 2 weeks of good faith negotiations to figure it out.
But Republicans are expected to have to rely on only their party to reopen. House Democrats made clear they don't want to use the 2-week period to find a bipartisan solution on how ICE operates, instead demanding immediate changes.
Body cameras should be mandatory. Masks should come off. Judicial warrants should absolutely be required, consistent with the Constitution in our view.
I'm not just a no, I'm a firm no, and I'm going to advocate with colleagues that they vote no.
Without Democrat support, Republicans cannot lose more than a single vote to approve the funding package due to their bare-bones majority.
The Democrats play games with this, and I think it's very unfortunate because what they're doing is they're jeopardizing services to the American people. When you're talking about the Department of Homeland Security, remember what's included in that. You have TSA agents for the airports. You have the Coast Guard. You have FEMA. We're in the middle of a winter storm disaster on the East Coast. We can't play games with this.
The House Speaker and other Republicans have indicated support for changes to ICE. like mandating that immigration officers wear body cameras. But the demand to remove masks and expand warrants will be tougher to address. Johnson argued that masks protect agents from harassment, and expanding warrants could make immigration enforcement more difficult. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Joining us to discuss this further is Madeline Somerville, Democratic strategist and attorney, and we have Angie Wong, Republican strategist and political columnist. First of all, good afternoon to you both. Madeline, let me start with you. You heard what House Speaker Mike Johnson said. Democrats are threatening the safety of Americans. What is your response?
Yeah, I think that that's a bold characterization and an untrue one. Actually, FEMA is still operating. All of the emergency functions of FEMA are still operating. TSA agents are still coming to work, and they are entitled to get back pay for when they come back. So everything that he's saying is a severe over-exaggeration, which doesn't surprise me, because the last time that we had a government shutdown, the answering machine at the White House said that the Democrats were responsible for this because they insisted upon giving healthcare to illegal immigrants. I think that the rhetoric that's coming out of the Republicans from the White House is beyond frustrating, and they would do well to start telling the American people the truth.
Angie, let me go to you now. Your response, and what do you say to House Speaker Mike Johnson saying that he's confident that this partial shutdown will end on Tuesday? What do you think about separating DHS from the larger funding package?
Yeah, I too am very hopeful that all of this will be over in the next couple of hours. I think as soon as the House reconvenes, and they will pass this pretty quickly. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth on whether or not DHS is going to get defunded, and that's the rhetoric coming from the left. Here's the truth. The big, beautiful bill finances a lot of DHS's and ICE operations for the next 3 to 4 years. So there's going to be zero chance that any of these operations will actually stop. Maybe after that, yes, there's going to be some funding cuts, but for now we're safe. So as Madeline said, FEMA is still working. TSA is still working. They're not getting paid. Coast Guard, same thing. But do you want all of these emergency services to stop, especially when we're having record low temperatures across the nation? We need to make sure that these are well financed, that they're ready to go in case there are real emergencies. We already had 14 people die in New York City because of the cold. We need to be able to ensure that no additional Americans are harmed due to these low temperatures, and also any other emergencies that we may have that, are just around the corner. So I think the games have stopped. I think after Tuesday, hopefully all this will be done, and then we'll move on to the next fight.
Okay, so Madeline, what do you think about the idea about separating DHS from the funding package to avoid a broader shutdown?
I think it's a really smart tactic. I think it's a way for Democrats to be able to say, we can address the possibility of people blaming us for having the shutdown by taking care of them, by making sure that all of these programs like Social Security or food stamps are funded and refrain from having the kinds of problems that we had in the last shutdown. So I think it's very smart. The problem is, in these next 1 or 2 weeks when they're going to be negotiating DHS funding, what Angie said is absolutely right? A lot of the program is funded through the big, beautiful bill. However, these appropriations are still needed. And so the problem is actually within the Democratic Party, the Democrats are split, because some people like AOC want ICE to be abolished. And some people like Chuck Schumer probably want common sense immigration reform. And that is a big thing to have to work out within the Democratic Party in a very short period of time. And it's really difficult for Chuck Schumer in particular because he is facing a challenge from AOC. And so much of the base right now is leaning way left. So I think the problem might actually be coming from inside the House.
Okay, Angie, so what I think is different about this shutdown, at least slightly, and worth pointing it out, is that Johnson publicly has said President Trump is leading the push for this bill and that it's his call to do it this way. How are you reading that?
I'm not reading that at all. I think Mike Johnson has been out, as of yesterday, he's been on all the Sunday morning shows pushing for this to be over already. Look, the American public, we do not want to go through another government shutdown. We did that. We had the longest government shutdown in history back in November. We don't need another one. We just want the government to run. We want them to do whatever they have to not interrupt our lives. And I think that it can be accomplished, but there are political games being played, and from both sides. Okay, we're all accountable in this, but the reality is that this should be a seamless process. Already, you have the Senate pass the bill. We need to throw it back at Mike Johnson to get it done, and I think he has the support. He's already rallied up all the Republicans to get it going. The only pushback that he's seeing is that Anna Luna Paulina wants to make sure that the SAVE Act gets in there next. Okay, we'll do that after this is passed. But I think by midweek, this should be resolved. And then we'll have more time to fight for, other causes.
Okay, so Madeline, Angie says she's not reading that. Am I overreading it that President Trump is leading this? You tell me.
I think that when it comes to President Trump's involvement in policy matters, he's the one reading things, right? He's the one reading the room. I've never thought that President Trump was an ideologue. He wants to give the people what they want. And I think right now the president is hesitant because people aren't necessarily sure what they want. And the polls are not reflecting that. I just talked about people not being sure within the Democratic Party, but on the Republican side too. And I think the way that actually President Trump was able to win the election was because he won over so many independents and swing voters. I think right now those independents and swing voters do not like what DHS and ICE are doing. I think they're not responding positively at all. The polls are indicating. And so I think that he's stuck in a position to where he has his advisors telling him continue to do this immigration, and he has the far right people who I believe that he's interacting with on a consistent basis, telling him to keep going. But he knows that that's not what the people who ended up electing him want. So it's a rock and a hard place on all sides.
So Angie, Madeline mentioned multiple opinions within the Democratic Party and perhaps debate within the Republican Party. So I want to ask you, what is the Republican consensus on DHS? Because House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries indicated to Speaker Johnson that he won't be able to rely on Democratic votes. So, Johnson may have to try to get virtually all of his members on this vote.
Yeah, I think Tom Homan said it best last week, which is ICE operations are not stopping. We're here to do our job and enforce the law. And I never could really wrap my brain around why anyone would push back on just simple law enforcement. And that's what we're seeing play out on a very dramatic scale here. So I think those things will continue to go on. Now, Tom Homan and President Trump are also wise enough to know the optics of this and understand the politics beyond the ground operations that we're seeing. And it is very, very clear that Republicans did not have a stronghold on what was going on the ground in Minnesota with the shootings, and we didn't win the optics on that. I hate to say it because 2 people are dead, but the reality is both sides need to be held accountable for how we politicized all of this. One thing I do want to mention is that, here in Florida, and certainly speaking with my friends in Texas, we have far more ICE arrests here than in Minnesota. It is minuscule compared to Minnesota because our government actually works with ICE and works with the federal agencies. So you don't see the protests. You don't see the shootings. There's nothing. In fact, it is a clean, peaceful transfer to federal custody here. So I think that, if we can emulate that in other states, we're going to be just fine. But it's just, unfortunately, everyone's got a cell phone. Everyone wants to create a little bit of drama in their city because they oppose the Trump administration, period.
So, Madeline, what do you say to that? What do you say to the argument that ICE is simply carrying out the president's promise on immigration, which the American people voted on?
I'd be happy to address that. I think that the fact is that there are specific policies that are coming from the Trump administration that we have documented. For example, one from May 12th, one from June 14th, that are being adopted in different parts of the country and not in others. And I can't imagine another reason besides wanting to escalate things. For example, ICE agents in Minneapolis, we've seen dozens of reports of this. And like I said, there was a directive from June 14th that said that if someone is filming you as an ICE agent, that constitutes doxing and that doxing puts your safety at risk. And so you are allowed to use whatever means necessary to stop them. That would explain why, when there was a woman who was standing off to the side before Alex Preddy stood in front of her, just filming, right? Why that ICE agent went out of his way to come over and push her. That's what started the entire incident. And so it's issues like that, where it's directives like that, where it pits the American people and ICE agents against each other on purpose, because we all know that filming is a First Amendment right, and that it's been protected by courts everywhere, including the Supreme Court. So these are specific directives that are coming from, and also I just actually discovered this morning, instead of allowing people who have applied for asylum to stay in their homes, they're coming to arrest them, because you're allowed to detain them technically until their court date, but they're not giving them any notice of that. And we've never followed that policy in the past, because it's just cruel if it's a person who's following all the rules. But so they're deliberately surprising people, but because people are living by the law, and ICE is being taught something different. So I don't know where they're in all the places they're applying this, but I know that it's escalating things, because we're getting two different messages from two different sides.
Angie, your comments.
Well, I mean, if ICE agents are able to detain them, that is by law, right? So it's not like it's cruel. I don't think they decide what's cruel or what's not cruel. And maybe there was provided. We don't really know the full situation of that. But here's the thing. ICE agents shouldn't even be doing arrests. They're not allowed to do arrests. It's the local PD that has to do the arrest. But when your mayors and your governors are telling PD to stand down, do not work with federal agencies, well, guess what has to happen? ICE has to kind of step in and fill in that gap. And I think that is where the problem really comes around, is that you have to have law enforcement work with law enforcement, not against each other. And I think we're seeing all of this because of the leaders that be pitting law enforcement against law enforcement. And nobody wants to see this. This is a terrible, terrible situation. I'm very happy that Tim Walz actually called President Trump to say, okay, how do we do this? Because everyone's got to bring everything down. And we've seen it over the weekend. Yes, there were still protests, but yes, you can definitely see the temperature has brought down by a lot. But now we also see the theatrics of it, the circus of it happening in the government shutdown, which is that Chuck Schumer and others are trying to use this ICE controversy to do a partial shutdown of the government. So, I think it's all been exposed at this point, what this was all about, really, which is to create a narrative just enough for Chuck Schumer to sell it to the senators to say, no, we don't want to pass this one additional appropriation bill because ICE funding is in it. I don't think that's a great message. Clearly, American people, we don't even want to see it. We don't want to hear it anymore. We just want to work in government.
Well, all right, let's just leave it there. I am hopeful that things will calm down in Minneapolis, because President Trump said he had a great conversation with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, so I'm hopeful for that. All right, thank you both for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Violent crime falls in Washington, D.C. The nation's capital saw just 2 murders last month compared with 9 in January 2025. More news after this.
I'm Amy Grant, and I want to talk to you from my heart about the heart. I would have been the last person on the list to say this woman has a problem with her heart. So no, there was nothing about my life that said, you have a ticking time bomb in your chest. But I did. I wound up in the office of a cardiologist because I was there with my husband. And at the tail end of that, the cardiologist looked at me and said, I want to see you. No one was more surprised than I was to learn I was living with a rare heart condition. He said, Amy, this condition, you'll be fine, and then catastrophic. A few months later, I had open heart surgery that saved my life. And I owe it to the research and life-saving medical breakthroughs developed by the American Heart Association. That's why I'm asking you to join me and become a monthly donor to the American Heart Association. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. If this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, but your support can save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card and we'll send you this special t-shirt you can wear to show you're part of a community of monthly donors working to help save more lives like mine. I'm grateful for the American Heart Association. Their research gave me more time to do the things I love with the people I love. So listen to your heart. I'm here today because I did. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor and help save even more lives. Thank you.
Whispered across generations, a hidden secret unveils the essence of longevity and vitality, a timeless legend regarding energy and wonder. Rooted in ancient health wisdom, we proudly introduce Pure Tang Black Ginseng, a 100% natural organic energy drink made from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng. It takes 2,260 days and nights from seed to growth, undergoing a meticulous 9-step process of steaming and drying. Black ginseng reaches its full potency, enriched with ginsenoside RG3 and enhanced absorption efficiency. No sugar, no caffeine, no artificial ingredients. Experience the pure natural power of Pure Tang Black Ginseng. Nourish your body, strengthen your immunity, and boost your energy. To order Pure Tang Black Ginseng, please visit puretang.com.
Violent crime is falling in Washington, D.C. The Washington Post reports that the nation's capital saw just 2 murders in January. That's compared to 9 murders between January 1st and February 1st of last year. According to the Post, D.C. hasn't gone more than the first 10 days of a new year without a homicide in 30 years. The Post also reported an 80% drop in carjackings compared to January 2025 and a 90% drop compared to 2024. Police data for January also showed a reduction in robberies, burglaries, and vehicle thefts. Assaults with dangerous weapons were up 28% so far this year. Total violent crime was down 37%. Arizona authorities announced a new investigation today into the disappearance of Savannah Guthrie's mother. Guthrie is a co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. Officials say the case is now being treated as a crime.
We saw some things at the home that were concerning to us. We believe now, after we processed that crime scene, that we do in fact have a crime scene, that we do in fact have a crime, and we're asking the community's help.
84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was last seen on the evening of January 31st at her home in the Tuscan area. Her family reported her missing around noon Sunday. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed the timeline. Speaking this morning, Nanos called the home a crime scene, adding that Guthrie did not leave on her own. Nanos said Guthrie needs daily medication to survive. He described her as mentally sharp. The FBI has been notified. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is also assisting. We'll keep you updated on the investigation as it unfolds. Authorities in Florida today detailed the cases against a number of accused and convicted sexual predators. The state's attorney general was joined by local and federal authorities in Tampa.
This morning is another opportunity to send a clear message to all predators out there, child molesters, traffickers, people that want to go after the most vulnerable in our state, that we take this more seriously than anything else. Going after predators is our #1 priority, and that is not going to change.
Florida's Attorney General laid out several recent cases. One individual who faced human trafficking and racketeering charges is scheduled for sentencing this week. In another case, a restaurant owner in St. Petersburg, Florida, was charged with 18 counts of possession of child pornography. In a separate case, the Florida AG said it was seeking the death penalty against another accused child sex offender. The FBI and the Las Vegas Metro Police are investigating a biolab after raiding 2 homes in East Las Vegas. Authorities say the operation may be linked to the illegal biolab uncovered in California in 2023.
We're at the Sugar Springs Drive home. Our teams went inside and found evidence of possible biological material, including refrigerators with vials containing unknown liquids.
Our laboratory division in Quantico offers a range of specialized services routinely used to advance complex cases, including our evidence response team, scientific response analysis unit, and the technical hazards response unit.
Hazardous materials teams were called onto the scene. Property records show the home is owned by an LLC tied to David He. That's an alias used by the Chinese national arrested in 2023 on federal charges. The charges involved misbranding medical devices and false statements to the FDA. Police say at least one person has been arrested, though no identity has been released. The investigation is ongoing. President Trump is warning UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer about the dangers of doing business with China. We speak to an analyst about this after this break.
I go by Jackie. I'm 44 years old. I had 3 kids at the time and single mother. I was working 60 hours a week, still couldn't pay the bills, skipped meals so that they could eat. It's been hard because one thing falls into place, 10 things fall out of place. You know, I just can't do this alone and make it work.
1 in 5 children face hunger in America, and food costs are rising. But everyone needs nourishing food to thrive, and they can when we work together so our neighbors can feed their families. Call or go online right now to join Feeding America with your gift of just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day. Together, thanks to a nationwide network of food banks, dedicated volunteers, and the monthly support of people like you, we can fill plates with nutritious food for families across America.
One day my mother came over to my house and said, "There's a meeting at the pantry." I said, "Okay," and I went. There were some ladies in there. They were from the food bank. They asked several questions. Some of those were about me and my story, but it helped me to open up a little bit.
We're getting closer to the day when no one in America faces hunger, but we can't do it without you. Call or go online now. Visit helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. 98% of donations go directly to help millions of people facing hunger, from coast to coast and in your own community. And when you give by credit card, we'll send you this exclusive canvas grocery bag to show you are a part of a movement of supporters working together to help end hunger.
I have people that I can trust. I have hope.
Please call now or make your monthly donation at helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double in impact.
That first time seeing my son, I feel like my life did a 180. I was already trying to change my perspective of life and really just be a father figure that I never had. Being present is the most important part. I'm still growing every day, becoming a better version of myself, to be the better mirror for my son. I mean, he's just growing. He's becoming his own person. Man, first I saw him dance, bro, he brings the vibes, you know what I'm saying? He brings the party no matter what. He really a definition of like why he loves somebody. And I love him to the death of me.
Colombia's leader, Gustavo Petro, is heading to Washington to meet President Trump tomorrow. Here's a look.
The meeting is likely to focus on drugs, Colombia being the world's largest cocaine producer, and the U.S. is by far the biggest consumer. Trump and Petro have been trading accusations for months now, and Trump accuses Petro of doing nothing to stop the production of drugs in Colombia, calling him, quote, a illegal drug leader. The White House has also said it could take military action against Colombia. Petro also criticized Trump and his administration's immigration policies. Ahead of the meeting, the Colombian president took steps to ease the tensions with Washington. He announced the resumption of migrant deportation flights from the U.S. to Colombia. Now, Petro's visit comes before Colombia's May elections.
And staying on Trump's international ambitions, the president says he's optimistic the U.S. will make a deal with Cuba. And the president has some words of warning for Canada on China. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on that, plus a major World Trade Organization decision on U.S.-China trade.
President Trump yesterday discussed the effects of Maduro's capture on Cuba and the blockade that preceded it.
Well, Cuba's a failing nation. It has been for a long time, but now it doesn't have Venezuela to prop it up. So we're talking to the people from Cuba, the highest people in Cuba, to see what happens.
Trump says he wants Cubans who fled to the U.S. to be able to return.
They have their family there. They haven't been able to see them in years, many, many years. So I think we're going to make a deal with Cuba. It's in bad shape. Cuba's in bad shape. Cuba has a humanitarian problem.
Cuba has long relied on Venezuela for energy. In 2025, Venezuela supplied roughly 1/3 of the island's daily oil needs.
They have no money. They have no oil. Venezuela, they live off Venezuelan money and oil.
Trump said last week tariffs would be imposed on imports from countries that supply Cuba with oil.
Turning to Canada, President Trump on Saturday said the U.S. would respond in a significant way if Canada proceeds with the trade agreement it negotiated with China.
If they do a deal with China, yeah, we'll do something very substantial. Because we can have a great relationship with China, President Xi, but we don't want China to take over Canada.
Trump last week said he would impose 100% tariffs on Canada if it follows through on a trade deal with China. And an update from the World Trade Organization, the U.S. says WTO rules are inadequate after the group sided with China in a dispute. The WTO has issued findings that upheld China's claims that certain U.S. tax credit programs discriminated against Chinese products. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer responded sharply, saying current WTO rules fail to address China's massive and harmful excess capacity, especially in energy technology. Greer said the ruling penalizes the U.S. for defending industries Beijing has targeted for global dominance, while ignoring the damage caused by China's industrial policies. China filed the challenge in 2024, arguing that IRA tax credits unfairly excluded Chinese-made goods. A WTO panel was established later that year, ultimately siding with Beijing.
Under WTO rules, subsidies for domestic goods are allowed only under narrow exceptions, such as being necessary to protect public morals. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
President Trump is warning UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer about the dangers of doing business with China, and he's announced that the US and India have reached a trade agreement and will begin lowering tariffs on each other's goods immediately. Joining us to discuss is Daniel Lacalle, chief economist at Tressis Hedge Fund, international financial analyst, and author of the book Freedom or Equality. Good afternoon, Daniel. First, before we get to the UK-China trade deal, can I just get your quick thoughts very briefly on the latest US-India trade deal?
Thank you, Don. I think that the news so far look very encouraging. A trade deal that would be substantial improvement to the current situation between the United States and India, but also very, very positive for energy because it's a trade deal that would include a commitment from India to reduce quite significantly its imports from Russia and start importing more oil from the United States and also other raw materials. A very significant deal in which the tariff burden would be quite radically reduced, and at the same time in which a lot of the non-tariff barriers of the Indian economy would be lifted. And this is a key element that has been repeated over and over by the Trump administration, the importance of bringing to the table when discussing trade deals, non-tariff barriers. Because if you reach a trade deal with Brazil, with India, with South Africa, with Russia, with Indonesia, some of the countries with the highest trade barriers in the world, and you don't include non-tariff barriers, then you're basically just leaving more than half of the challenges outside of the table.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Let's talk about UK-China trade talks. Some of the agreements include over $3 billion in export deals, more market access, hundreds of millions worth of new investments. I just want you to take a quick listen to what President Trump said about it.
Well, it's very dangerous for them to do that, and it's even more dangerous, I think, for Canada to get into business with China. Canada is not doing well. They're doing very poorly. And you can't look at China as the answer.
So President Trump says it's very dangerous, and we already know China has a poor record of keeping commitments. What do you make of this UK-China deal?
Again, it's the same mistake that the European Union has made with its trade deal with India, is that it does not seem to learn from experience. And we're not talking now of things that we may think or opinions. This is now facts. We know that the previous trade deals with China signed by countries like Canada, also by the UK, have been detrimental to the manufacturing, to the level of growth of the UK economy, and have not delivered in the kind of promise of enormous market and enormous investments that they seem to bring in the headlines. I think that is the big challenge. The big problem, again, with the UK is that it seems to want to double down on trade deals that have been negative for the UK economy, which, let's not forget, is in stagnation and whose manufacturing sector is truly in a very, very negative state. So it's not something that should be boasted in terms of reaching a very quick trade deal just to grab some headlines. They need to be very specific about commitments. And what we know from the past is that those commitments become paper promises afterwards.
But what do you say to this, that the UK Minister of State for Trade Policy said it would be bonkers, frankly, and this is a quote from him, for the UK to ignore the presence of China on the world stage?
No, absolutely. And it would be bonkers to ignore the reality of the presence of China in the world stage. And the reality of the presence of China in the world stage is that absolutely you can reach trade deals, but you need to acknowledge that China does not work with the same principles and with the same limitations and with the same transparency that the UK, Canada, or the United States works with. So that is the problem. The problem is that the Minister of Trade in the UK seems to be in some kind of, surprising world in which he seems to not want to acknowledge the reality, now evidence for the energy sector in the UK, for the manufacturing sector in the UK. China always does the same thing. It promises a very, very, very large market in exchange of turning a blind eye to its completely different regulatory, fiscal, and transparency measures. What happens afterwards is that very, very large market is not that large because the population in China have very, very low wages and they don't consume as much as UK ministers tend to think. Hence, the problem is that what is actually bonkers is for the Labour government in the UK not to admit the fact that previous trade deals with China have been very negative for the UK economy. So they can reach agreement, they can reach bilateral agreements. There is no problem with all of that, by the way. They already have them. I don't understand why they need to reach a trade agreement which seems to be more focused on giving the headline that the UK is doing something against Trump rather than for the UK people.
Okay, so Daniel, one thing you said is that the Chinese people doesn't consume as much. I'm wondering if you can expand on what the U.S. Secretary of Commerce said. He said that the Chinese are great exporters, but when you're trying to export to them, it's difficult. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think it's very evident. China is one of the countries with the largest trade barriers in terms of non-tariff barriers. It has allegedly low tariffs, but very large trade barriers. To start with, obviously, the fact that there is very little legal security, obviously, industrial protection and intellectual property protection, etc. All of those elements are trade barriers. But there's also a very important trade barriers, is that it's always talking about the promise of a very large market. However, when companies want to actually develop their businesses in China and sell to China, what they find themselves is with three things. Number one is that the average consumer has a much lower income than what they actually expected, and they also have very low tolerance to added consumption. Number two, that the enormity of the excess capacity of the productive sector in China basically makes it impossible for Western companies to compete. And that is something that that Lutnick and other people have mentioned, that how the Chinese government subsidizes that massive excess capacity. And third, and I think that is very important, is that Chinese citizens don't consume on credit. The use of credit cards, the use of debt instruments, the use of loans to purchase goods and services is something that is not in the culture of the Chinese citizen. Therefore, what many companies have found in the past, not many, I think the vast majority of them, is that the alleged prospect of monumental sales in China end up being a very, very thin promise.
That is so true, that the Chinese people, like you said, they don't operate on credit. I didn't think of that before, but it's so true. I want to bring up another angle, which is human rights. Does expanding trade without a strong focus on human rights concerns weaken the UK's leverage on these issues? For example, I'm thinking about Jimmy Lai being released, because he's a British citizen, right? He wasn't even mentioned in the readouts, in the meetings between China and the UK.
This is what I don't understand as well, and it's a great point what you're bringing up, is that the UK, the European Union, Canada are all the time talking about human rights and about environmental issues. However, when it comes to present themselves and reach a quick, dirty, and very low commitment trade deal with China, they seem to forget all those elements. So it's a little bit almost I would say that it's challenging for anybody that looks at the economy to believe in all of those elements that seem to be monumental and pillars of the decision process of the UK government, of the EU, or of Canada. And then when it comes to going to China and demanding that in order to arrive to those trade deals, there should be drastic changes in human rights and certainly in environmental protection, none of those things are brought up, which comes back to the bonkers comment of the Minister of Trade. What on earth are they expecting? That only by trade China is going to change its policies in terms of respect for human rights and respect for the environment? That is never going to happen if the countries that they reach trade deals with don't actually force China to make strong commitments to improve the human rights situation and to improve the legal, investor security, and environmental protection measures.
Just finally, Daniel, I want to hear from you. Why do you think this is happening? Because the UK's trade deal comes right on the heels of Canada's trade deal, which President Trump said, you can't look to China for answers. So why do you think this is happening?
I call it a post-Davos tantrum. I think that what happened in Davos was that the U.S. delegation arrived and gave very, very tough lessons and showed the reality of the mistakes made by Canada, by the UK, by the European Union with the wrong policies that have led those economies to stagnation. And then it seems that everybody felt in a rush to reach big trade deals with China or with India in order to sort of send a signal that says we are relevant, we matter. No? Well, no. Basically, you're shooting yourself in the foot yet again, by the way, because this is not a question, again, if we had this discussion, this interview, maybe 10 years ago, there would be elements of debate. There would be an opinion. Now it's not an opinion. Now it's an evidence. It's an evidence that China, the European Union, the UK have completely demolished their industry, their agriculture, their energy sectors, their farming sectors by reaching agreements with China that have not delivered any type of strong improvement for their domestic economy. They have lost in terms of job creation. They have lost in terms of their leading sectors. Think about this for a second. Germany, the global leader of the automotive sector, gave the future of the automotive sector to China with the wrong policies. And now, just because President Trump, like he did with the nuclear mistakes, is saying things that are logical, things that are evident. It's not news. China is working with different rules, and they're not changing. A couple of decades ago, people thought that by trading more with China, China would be opening its economy, opening its freedoms, opening its institutions. That is not happening. The opposite is actually happening. So with that evidence, it seems that they wanted to create a post-Davos tantrum and generate big headlines to sort of show that they're relevant when they have been sort of proven to be wrong in their domestic and foreign policies.
Yeah, well said. And I just want to reiterate your point that we have evidence now that doing this kind of trade with China will negatively impact your economy. Okay, thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Pennsylvania's most famous groundhog reveals his prediction. The annual tradition goes back to more than a century. More news after this break.
I've stayed hidden for decades, but I had to come back because they started selling Folicious at Walmart.
This isn't your average soup. It's made with real beef tallow and fresh spices. They think I survive on berries and bark, but this is real pho with real broth. And I'm never going back. They followed the smell of the pho. I gotta move. If they find this stash, it's over. Folicious. Restaurant quality, anywhere.
I was a young dad of 3 amazing kids. I was finally following my dreams. Just when you feel like life is starting to come together, you get kind of hit in the face. I was born with a congenital heart defect and had open heart surgery as a kid. I was supposed to go to the heart doctor once a year, and I finally went. He listened to my heart, and I'll never forget, he sat back and he said, yeah, it's time for open heart surgery, or you risk your aorta rupturing, and that's it. I was scared out of my mind. The night before my open heart surgery, I made a goodbye video for my kids. Be strong. Take care of your mom. I love you guys.
Seeing, all the kids hug him goodbye and hoping that they were going to be able to hug him again.
I love you. But I did make it, thanks to the work of the American Heart Association. So that's why I'm asking you to join me. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help get the next person trained in CPR, get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care, as well as fund the next medical breakthrough like these heart valves that helped save my life. When you give $19 a month with your credit card, we'll send you this special t-shirt to show you're a part of our community of monthly donors.
I'm most grateful that I get to have a husband that I get to grow old with, and a husband that gets to be there for his children.
I believe without the American Heart Association, I would not be here today. If this can happen to me, it can happen to you, it can happen to anybody. Your donation can literally help save a life. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor.
Buying and selling a home can be really hard these days. That's why who you work with matters. I recently helped a couple buy their dream home even before selling their current one. They were both very busy and didn't have time to sell the traditional way. HomeLight's Buy Before You Sell program was a game changer. They were able to buy and sell on their own schedule. It was so easy and they were thrilled. See how you can buy before you sell at homelight.com today.
Now, on to the weather. Forecasters warn freezing conditions will persist across much of the East Coast today, and the outlook for the rest of the month isn't looking much warmer either. Forecasters say temperatures will begin to inch up today along the East Coast, but they're also warning that wind chills will drop to near 0 degrees in North Carolina, saying snow and ice will linger. This is after a weather phenomenon known as a bomb cyclone hit over the weekend, prompting flight cancellations and icy road conditions for a second weekend in a row. The National Weather Service recorded record-breaking snowfall in parts of the state. It was the most snow some cities and towns received since 1980. Florida, meanwhile, saw snow flurries yesterday as far south as Tampa. Now, forecasters are expecting a major disruption to the polar vortex, the wind system that keeps freezing air from coming too far south. This will mean temperatures from Minnesota all the way to Georgia will likely be below average this February. This winter could be one of the coldest in years. More than 100 deaths have been linked to the wintry weather and storms since late January. Winter will last a little longer this year. That's according to groundhog Punxsutawney Phil. His handlers relayed his prediction today at Gobbler's Knob in western Pennsylvania.
We look to the future and not just the past. So I suppose this party could use a forecast. It is my job this February 2 to look to the skies and report back to you that there is a shadow here on my ground. 6 more weeks of winter abound!
Tens of thousands of people visited Gobbler's Knob for the annual tradition that goes back more than a century. The 1999 movie Groundhog Day, starring Bill Murray, is also known for driving even more interest in the event. Last year's announcement was 6 more weeks of winter, Phil's most common prediction. Phil isn't the only animal being asked for the winter weather forecast. Groundhog Day events will take place across the U.S. and Canada. A $12 billion rare earth stockpile. The Trump administration makes a historic move to reduce U.S. reliance on China. More news after this break.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天音的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团 选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。 以我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。